Tonight, somewhere in the world, someone is going to die, and the people who love them are going to do something. They are not going to gather, they are going to cry. They are going to prepare the body, say words over it, and place it somewhere deliberate. You probably already know what that looked like, but here is what no one ever asks. What did the very first human do? Before the ritual, before the religion, before the language? When the very first person in your bloodline looked at someone they loved lying still on the ground and realized that person was never going to move again, what did they do? The answer is stranger than you think, and it reaches so far back into time that it does not just tell you about your ancestors. It tells you something about yourself right now, today. Let us go back, not a few hundred years, not a few thousand, back 300,000 years to a cave system in South Africa called Rising Star. In 2013, a team of researchers led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger discovered something that rewrote the entire timeline of human behavior. Deep inside this cave, in a chamber almost impossible to reach, they found bones, not random bones, not the scattered remains of animals dragged in by predators, deliberately placed human remains. The species was Homo naledi, a creature with a brain about 1/3 the size of yours, a creature that, according to every assumption scientists have made, should not have been capable of understanding death at all, and yet there they were, laid to rest on purpose in the dark. Stop for a moment and feel how strange that is. Your brain is 3 times larger than theirs. You have language, you have culture, you have every philosophical framework ever invented to help you process loss, and some days death still breaks you completely. They had none of that, and they still did something. They still chose to carry their death to a place of darkness and lay them down with intention. Why? What were they feeling that made them to do it? The honest answer is we do not know, but the question itself is the discovery, because for most of the 20th century, scientists assumed that grief, ritual, and the recognition of death as something meaningful were late developments in human history, products of big brains, language, religion, and civilization. What Rising Star told us is that we were wrong. The impulse to do something with the death is not a product of intelligence. It may be one of the things that created it. Go back even further. Before Homo naledi, before any creature we would recognize as human, there is a behavior observed in chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, that researchers like James Anderson at the University of Stirling have spent years documenting. When a chimp dies, the group does not simply walk away. Mothers carry dead infants for days, sometimes weeks. The group gathers around a dying elder in silence. They groom the body, they sit with it. They leave only when something inside them seems to release. What that something is, no one can say for certain. But what it tells us is this: the recognition of death and the need to respond to it is not a human invention. It is something much older, something that runs in your nervous system the same way it ran in theirs. Your body already knew what death was before your ancestors had a word for it. Now move forward to Homo sapiens, to the people who look like you. The oldest deliberately buried human body ever found is in a cave in Israel called Kafze. It is approximately 100,000 years old. The skeleton belongs to a young person, estimated to be around 12 years old, buried with them with the antlers of a deer. No one put those antlers there by accident. They mean something to someone who would never write it down, never explain it, never leave any record except the objects themselves. They mean something so strongly that this person carried them down into the earth and placed them alongside someone they had lost. What did they believe? What story were they telling themselves about where that child had gone? We will never know, but the action itself is unmistakable. 100,000 years ago, your ancestors were already trying to answer the questions you still ask. Move forward again, approximately 26,000 years ago, southern Moravia, in what is now the Czech Republic, a site called Dolní Vestonis. Here, researchers uncovered a triple burial. 3 individuals laid together in a specific arrangement. One of them had been placed face down. Their hands were positioned touching in the central figure. Red ochre covered their bones. This was not random. This was choreographed. Someone looked at these 3 people and made decisions about how they should be positioned in relation to each other. Someone felt that the arrangement mattered, that the posture mattered, that the color mattered, that what the living did in those final hours would somehow echo into wherever the dead were going. Archaeologist Paul Petit, who has spent decades studying the origins of mortuary behavior, argues that this kind of deliberate burial represents one of the clearest windows we have into the prehistoric mind. The moment your ancestors started treating the dead differently from the living, they were admitting something extraordinary. They were admitted that the relationship did not end at death, that the person who was going was still, in some sense, present, and that the living had obligations to them still. That belief is not primitive. That belief is something you still carry. Think about the last time someone you loved died. What did you do? You probably did not just walk away. You probably stayed near the body longer than made biological sense. You probably touched it. You probably arranged things around it. You probably said things out loud that the person could not hear, because somewhere in your nervous system the relationship had not yet updated. The connection was still firing and your body did not know what to do with that. That experience, that gap between death of a person and the death of your bond with them, is something researchers now call continuum bond theory. First articulated by psychologists Klaas, Silverman and Nickman in the 1990s. It challenged the old assumption that grief was about letting go. What they found instead was that healthy mourning is often about transformation, not severance. The relationship does not end, it changes form. The dead person moves from a physical presence to an internal one. They became a voice in your head, a standard you measure yourself against, a reason you do think differently. Your ancestors did not have that language, but they had the same experience, and what they did with it 300,000 years ago in a dark cave in South Africa was the first attempt in all of human history to give that experience a physical form. To say with their bodies rather than their words, this person mattered, this person still mattered, and the fact that they are no longer moving does not mean we are done with them. Here is the counterintuitive part. The rituals your ancestors built around death were not really about the dead. They were about the living. The gathering was not for the person who was gone. It was for the people left behind, because grief in its rawest biological form is disorienting. It disrupts the social fabric. It creates uncertainty about who will now do the things that the dead person used to do. It floods the nervous system with cortisol and leaves the brain searching desperately for a narrative that makes sense. The ritual was the narrative. The burial was the answer. A way of saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it is real. And here is what we are going to do about it together. That is why grief still pulls you toward other people. That is why you make food for the bereaved even when food is not what they need. That is why you sit in rooms with strangers at funerals and feel something loosen in your chest when the service ends. Your nervous system is running ancient code that was written in the dark in a cave by people who had never heard a word for what they were feeling and did it anyway. There is one more thing, something that tends to stop people when they first encounter it. In 2021, researchers studying Homo naledi made an additional announcement. Not only had these small-brained creatures buried their dead, they had also marked the burial chamber with engravings, simple geometric shapes carved into the cave walls. Not paintings, not recognizable figures, just marks, lines and crosses, and shapes that served no practical purpose. Marks that said something happened here, something worth remembering. The debate about what those marks mean is still ongoing in the scientific community, but one interpretation is almost impossible to dismiss. These creatures, with brains a fraction of your size, living hundreds of thousands of years before what we call civilization, were already doing something that every human culture on earth does. They were turning death into meaning. They were making the unbearable into a record. They were insisting against all the silence of the universe that what happened here was not nothing. That impulse does not come from religion. It does not come from language. It does not come from the size of your brain or the length of your history. It comes from somewhere older than any of those things. It comes from whatever is in living creatures that refuses to simply move on. Tonight, when someone somewhere puts flowers on a grave or lights a candle in a dark room or says a name out loud into an empty house, they are doing exactly what those first humans did. Not because someone taught them, not because a book told them to do, but because the human nervous system across 300,000 years of loss has never once figured out how to just walk away, and neither, it turns out, has yours. If this video teaches you something, hit like, subscribe and share it with your friends. I will see you in the next video. Take care.